Hi, I'm Isaac Van Gies. I'm with Zwarten Tava Systems, and here we're going to show you how to put a transport line together. The first thing you need to do is measure the full length of a side rail. Normally they come at the right length, but you just want to double check that. And sometimes you need to cut them on site. Some people have different lengths of transport lines depending on where it needs to be, so we'll send a stock length instead that you can cut to length. So now how to measure out. The first thing you're going to do is look at your drawing, and you have all the wheels measured out on the drawing. So that's the first thing you're going to do. You're going to grab your tape measure. Thank you, Andrew. And you're going to go along, and it always is measured from one side. So you can go along, you can put a little tick on the top for every single wheel that you have. That's the first step. The next step you're going to do is mark where your AirPod hangers go. Your AirPod hanger is 180 millimeters wide. So what we do then is we take the measurements that we have for the transport line. For the first one, it measures to the center of your AirPod hanger. And what you do then is you minus 90 off of that. You measure from the end. You put your little tick mark. Then 180 over, you put another tick mark. When you've done that, you're going to take a square and mark a line all the way down. And that's for your AirPod hanger. And then you put a number 4 in there. The reason for the 4 is how many bolts are required. When there's a 4, that means there's going to be 2 above and 2 below. Now that we have our AirPod hangers measured out, the next thing we're going to do is measure for the legs. The legs are 100 millimeters wide. So now you're going to take your tape measure again, measure from the end, and you're going to measure to the center. That's what the drawing has. But you're going to minus 50 millimeters, and that's going to give you the first side of your leg. Then you measure over, and you measure the other side of the leg, which is 100 millimeters more than you just measured. Again, you're going to put a line down each side, but not all the way to the bottom. Just all the way down to here. The bottom nut rail you don't need to put it on, and one here. In there, you put an X, so it marks that's where the leg goes, and you put the number 2. For a leg, you just need 1 bolt on top and 1 bolt on the bottom. Now that we have everything marked on here, the next step is going to be laying out all of the nuts, wheels that you're going to need to move forward. Okay, so you hit me here?
I can see your hands.
Okay, great. So now the next thing we're going to do is put on all of our wheels and our nuts, or sorry, our bolts. These all come tight, so you need to be able to loosen them off. And then what you need to do is loosen it enough that I can slide it on. I want the washer up, and I want the nut to go inside this nut rail. So you just line it up, slide it in. You have the mark here, you're going to put it on that mark. The next thing you're going to do, we have this AirPod hanger. It has the number 4. That's how we know it's an AirPod hanger. It needs 2 bolts above and 2 bolts below. So you can just slide them down. They don't slide great, but that's okay. And then I need 2 on top. And now I have my 4 for my AirPod hanger. And now the next thing I have is a leg. You might have another wheel yet, maybe not, maybe yes, depending on the length that you have and the design that was given to you on your drawings. But for my leg, I need 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom. That's the 2. Now that I have these bolts in, I can continue with my last 2 wheels and slide them in. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is an impact wrench with a 17 millimeter socket on it. And you're just going to line these up and drill them in. Line it up. And drill them in. And you're going to continue to do that for all your wheels. Okay, so now that you have the first one laid out, that's going to be your template. You're not going to mark any other transport lines. What you're going to use now is just your square and a nail to do the markings. For the wheels, you're just going to line them up so that it's the same, right? We don't need to do a marking on it for the wheel. You're just going to line it up. The wheels are not the most important part. if they're out quarter inch one way or the other, it doesn't matter. If it's out 5 inches, I care. But if it's out just a little bit, it's no big deal. That's why we have the template. Every single one's going to be made from that template, so it should line up pretty good. The one thing that you are concerned about though are these straight lines, because that's going to help you greatly in the future as you put your transport lines together. When you put the AirPod hanger in, you want to be able to line it up properly right away, and also your legs. With the lines on each side, that's going to help you. But we're not going to do it with a marker, we're going to do it with a nail. So all you have to do is line this up and put a mark down. Line it up and put a mark down. And you're going to do that for all of these. What's nice about it is that when you put your AirPod on later on, you will never see that line again. It's just so faint. But there's enough of a gouge there that you're going to be able to find it as you build your transport line. So now we just continue to make all the markings and we can build our first set. Okay, so now we're laying out the wheels on the next transport line. We're putting the bolts in. I did make a little mistake on the first piece. I took the bottom bolts out again because I can't slide my wheels past. So that's a little mistake I made. So now we continue on, and I need to put in my one bolt yet for my leg on the top, and a bolt on the bottom for the leg. This one I can do it now because when I'm done with this one, I'll put it aside on a pile, start making a pile, and make my next one. So now all I need to do is put my last two wheels on yet. Come on. Line them up, and now I can take my drill and nail them all down. Okay? Okay, so now that we have our transport line all set up, and we put our new wheels on, we put our bolts on, and we've made all that we need to make, right? So some jobs that's going to be 20, some jobs are going to be like 200 of them to make. The nice thing about the transport line is they're mirror image of each other. So I can take this transport line, flip it up. I'll show you one other important part. That the top of the transport line on the outside has a rail as well that always needs to be facing up. So when you lay down your transport lines, make sure that on this side as well we have a one groove up here, and we have two grooves on the bottom. Very important. This groove here later on is going to be used for your air line, so you don't want it stuck behind your wheels. So it's very important that we lay it out this way. So now what we can do is we can take this transport line and we can turn it around. Put one on this side, one on this side, and we're ready to build the rest. Okay, so the next thing we're going to show you is how to put an AirPod hanger onto the transport line. We have 4 different styles of AirPod hangers. This one has no U, it's just flat. This one has a long U, it's called a long U. We have another one that has a short U. Then we have another one that's got a pipe on the end. Right now I'm just going to show you these two, but you need to look in your drawings. Every single transport line in your drawings are going to show you what has to be in the certain spots. It's going to be marked with an X or an O or a multiply sign or a minus sign. That's how they're all labeled on your drawings. So now the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your AirPod hanger, put it on, line up all the holes, and then slide it over to that mark we put on, and then you can bolt it down. Okay, then we fasten all the nuts down. Now they're all fastened. The next thing we're going to do is put on our AirPod hanger. Now there's a couple things about this AirPod hanger. One, these bolts have to come off, of course, because we need to put it into it. So you take off the bolt and you take off the washer. They are tight on there. And then we also have this part here. You need to, and this can be done beforehand. Someone can do this to all the AirPods. Is to pull out this little blue piece. Take this copper piece. That's going to go to your 8mm hose. And you're going to put that in there. And because it's brass and it's got a little air fitting on there as well, you just need to turn it tight by hand. And then with a wrench, turn it a quarter more. And that's it. No more than that. Now, when you're putting this together, you want to make sure that this part is facing towards the center of the transport line. Not towards the edge, but towards the center. We'll get to why later. But you're just going to put that in. Put your lock nut washer back on again. Thread in your... Okay, so now theoretically we have our legs on already. I don't have any legs to show you. But like I said before, the legs was the first thing you're going to put on. Line them up, bolt it on, everywhere a leg needs to be. And this one I only needed 2 legs. If you're longer, you probably need 4 legs. But this is a very short one. So now that we have our legs on, we have our AirPod hanger on. We put the flat on the one side and the long U on the other side. Often they're going to be different side to side. Very rarely are they both the same, but in a work area it would be. But a lot of places you're going to have one side a flat and the other side either a long U, a short U, or a one with a post on. So be careful, watch your drawings and do it properly. So now that we have our legs on, the transport line is actually going to be now in the greenhouse exactly where you're going to put it together. So we put the leg on, we've got our AirPod hanger on, it's all tight, it's all good. Now we have what we call a lifting pipe. That is going to go on both sides like so. It should be a tight fit. Yours might look a little different, but they all do the same. They all have a hole in the bottom and they all have a pipe going across. Now we have this copper style nut. We have this copper nut right here that we're going to put in, and that's going to go right in here. And for now you don't need to tighten it. All you need to do is get it on and thread it on enough that it's not going to fall off. All you need to do is thread on enough for that. So later on, when we have air to it, we're going to be able to lift it up. We're going to adjust the bottom nut and the top nut together to get it right flush. But we don't have air, so we can't do it yet, so we leave everything loose for now. So you can do that here. On the other part, you're going to put your AirPod hangers on and do all that as well. So the next step is going to be putting our air valve together. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is a slide valve that has an arrow on the nut side, and that arrow points towards the way the air is traveling. So if we're going to put our slide valve here, that means the arrow needs to point into the transport line. If I was going to be on this side, I would change it, and of course on that corner and on that corner. So it always changes wherever you're going to use it. So we need to make sure that the nut is on that side. Then we get this crazy little clamp. Comes with rubber inside. You peel the rubber out. Probably going to need some pliers to do that. Then you're going to wrap it around. Tighten that part there. And you're going to fasten it onto the valve. So get a screwdriver and tighten that up. The next part we're going to need is our hanger for it. The hanger you're going to put on 2 nuts and 2 bolts. And that's going to slide into here eventually. But before we get there, we're going to put this in the proper way, because we're still thinking about it. Air going that way. We're going to take these little guys here, and that's where your 8mm hose is going to go onto, and this part threads in. So it's going to not only thread into the valve, but it's also going to hold it because it's going through the cutout hole on the end. So in order to do that, we put 4 wraps of T-tape. With those 4 wraps, then we can just screw that in there. It's not easy screwing it in there, but anything good is not easy. And you're going to want to take your wrench, tighten both sides. Once both sides are tightened, you can now take this apparatus, slide it in. And you can take a wrench to tighten those down. Now the next part of this is going to be a hanger, because there's going to be a bar going across here with arms. So, first thing we need to do is put a hanger on. Now you put the hanger on the end, you go, oh, that doesn't fit. That's okay. All you need to do is loosen off this wheel, because remember I said before, the wheels are not the most important spot where they are. Then move that over. You're going to take two bolts, sorry. Put that on. Go right to the edge. Be right on the edge with it. Take your nuts, put them on. Double check that we're right at the edge. Now bring your wheel back as far as you can without touching it. You don't want to touch it, you just want to be far enough away. Put that on, make sure it still spins, and you're good to go. Now, you do the same thing for the other side, and then you can put your bar in. So what you're going to do is as you put the next side on, put the bar in, slide it all together, and bolt in the other side. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is stops. We have length stops and we have end stops. First thing we're going to talk about is a length stop. It comes with a U-bolt. That U-bolt is really a muffler clamp, so you have the part for the muffler still on it. You can throw that part out. You take the U-bolt, you put it underneath here. You take this angle bracket, it's got two holes in it. Now, everything comes galvanized. So because of galvanization, there's sometimes going to be slag in the hole, so you need to drill that out. Once you have that done, put this together. So now we're going to talk about our end stops. These stops have a little roller inside, so when the table hits it, we can still roll the table sideways. It goes on the end, so on one side will be your air, on the other side is where you're going to put your end stop. Only when the drawing indicates it, normally indicates it with a green square on your drawing, is where the stops go. So we're just going to bolt that on there. We want to make sure that the wheel inside is in the same where your end profile is, because your table is always the exact same length as your transport line. So we want to make sure that is in the same spot, and then we can just bolt it down. So the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is air lines. Air lines all 1 inch galvanized piping. You should be getting lots of 1 inch piping along with it, as well as fittings. Every fitting you need to use T-tape. You need to wrap every fitting 4 times and put it together. Adding some pipe dope would be a good idea as well. Sadly, those pipes don't go together that great. So that's what you're going to need. Now, at every single transport line, you're going to need one of these. And it transfers the air from your 1 inch pipe into the transport line. So what you first have to do is put this over top the 1 inch pipe on the floor, put a mark inside where you want to drill your hole, take it off, drill your 3/8 inch hole, and then put this on. The problem with putting this on first and drilling through, you might ruin the threads, and you don't want to do that. So now that that is done, you've got your hole drilled, you can put that on, you can put your bolts through, and get that all done. You have to remember too that there's a little washer inside there, and that washer goes right inside here. Very important, so the air doesn't leak. Now once that's all bolted together, you can take another one of these guys. It's the same thing. It's a 3/4 inch to a 8mm hose. You need to put on 4 wraps when you did the valve, but on this part you need to put 3 wraps on and tighten that into there. And again, once it's down, tighten it until just till it's tight. You do not need to try and make it too tight. You'll break things if you do. And that's how you put a air saddle onto a 1 inch galvanized pipe. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about the irrigation. We're going to talk about the gutter, how to hang the gutter, and how to do the gooseneck. So the first thing you're going to have is one of these, and that goes on top of a post. And that post, so you put that on top of the post, there's going to be a 2-inch U-bolt that grabs there. What's going to go in this section right here is the 75mm pipe that actually waters each table. And up in here is where the gutter fits. Now, when you put the gutter in, you'll notice that along the bottom it's not touching, and that is by design. So don't worry about that. So now that we have this on our post, and that's set, the next thing, and we put our gutter in, we put all of our piping in, the next thing we're going to want to do now is put in the goosenecks. So this is a piece that wraps around the gutter. It clips in on this side and nicely forms around. Another piece that we have is this tube that goes in here. And it doesn't go in easy, and that's okay. Just slide it down. There's also a little plastic black widget. It's a little triangle shape, and that's going to go in here. It doesn't have to right now. It goes in later when we try and adjust the height where we want to be. And we'll get to that in a minute. So the next thing we want to do now is we need to cut a hose. So, as you can imagine, this is sitting there. This is sitting here. We have the pipe sitting here. We're going to have this little piece here that pushes into a grommet. And this is the grommet. It's a little rubber piece. You're going to get some lube. You're going to put that lube on there. You're going to get a special drill bit to drill through the 75 millimeter pipe. You're going to push that in, and it goes in on the side of the pipe, not on the bottom. It goes on the side. Once you have that in, then you can put this piece in. It snaps right into that grommet. And now this is facing down. Now from there you need to cut a piece of 16 millimeter pipe. And it's going to be a soft black hose. And you want to go from there, from this point, down, around, almost touching the floor, up through your hollow piece of pipe here, to the top. Once you're at the top, you can put the hose on there, and then there's a piece of there's a triangle on this end, and that fits in there, so it doesn't spin, and it fits very nice. Now, these are flexible that you can move, and you want them a little bit on about a 45-degree angle. And just put that back in there again, so that if the water falls into the table, for sure, the table will roughly come to about here. And you want this flowing into the table. But you also want it that the water flows into the gutter. So when the table is not there, that water flows directly into the gutter. So, because normally we're watering anything from 3, 5, 8, 12 tables at a time, even sometimes up to 24 tables at a time. But when you turn that valve on, and let's say you're going to water 8, but there's only 7 tables, that way that 8th table just falls back in the gutter and gets recirculated.